Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. My name is James Batchelor and thank you very much for joining us for these daily broadcasts live on our YouTube channel. Now today on the show, I'm delighted to say we've got Andy Alderson from Vanarama. Hello, Andy.
Hi there, James. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. And thank you very much for coming onto the show. I've been very much looking forward to this interview actually, because I'm sure many people watching this, a very interesting company and how it's grown over the years. So thanks for coming on.
No problem.
For a bit of background, Andy set up Autorama in 2004 before moving into B2B leasing of commercial vehicles in 2007. He's had a long career in the motor industry, and Vanarama is rapidly becoming one of those brands that just trips off the tongue for many people. Now, we're going to be talking about the business, how it started, what the plans are for the rest of the year in the next 20 or 30 minutes or so. Now, if you want to get involved, then please do drop a question into the comments box and I'll do my best to ask it to Andy. Right, let's get cracking then, Andy. Thanks for coming on. Now, for the benefit of people and dealers who are watching, who may not be aware of Vanarama, could you just tell us a little bit more about the business, please?
Yeah, so you're right. I started in 2004. Prior to that, I'd been working in main dealer since '93. Started in the motor trade as a business manager. So I used to sell finance and PCP, Vauxhall Choices, down in Lex Vauxhall in Hemel. So I moved on to a family-run dealership in 1995, worked my way up to be dealer principal. And it was kind of 2003. I was an early adopter of the internet. So we were selling used cars on Auto Trader. We knew how to kind of work the system on Auto Trader. We were kind of doing click and collect back in 2003, because the kind of principles of selling a used car online still applied then. You buy well, you prep them well, good imagery, good descriptions. We get an inquiry on the phone, take a deposit, and then make sure it was right when the customer collected. So that was 2003. In January 2003, I took some vehicles from Citroën, a batch of 275 old technology diesel C5s. I don't know if you remember that vehicle.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
And basically, they had to be crushed by the end of that March. They had to be registered or they'd be crushed.
Yeah.
And Citroën put some huge bonuses on them. And I used to get in at 5 o'clock in the morning on the 1st of January or 2nd of January to download the new campaign. And they put so much bonus on those vehicles that I could sell them at half price and retain full margin and give the customer 2 years, 0%. It was a crazy deal. And I checked it. And ended up taking all of the stock. It was called a day promotion. And then basically the owner of the business, Mr. Broad, is Broad's Chalfont and Citroën. He had a bit of a heart attack because he got emailed an invoice as soon as I called the vehicles in. He said, I hope you've got a plan for these when I explained the deal. So we bought we set up a one-page website. We bought a domain, citroendirect.com. We bought a free phone number. Did a one-page advert in the Daily Mail because you used to be able to do regional adverts then. So we bought a one-page in the Southeast edition for £1,000 and waited for the phones to ring. The phones started that Saturday and we sold all 275 in 6 weeks. We sold 90% of them without seeing a customer. And that was kind of when I knew my future was in online retailing.
Yeah.
So that was 2003. I wanted to be a leasing broker because I was used to selling vehicles on a payment. But at that point, the lease companies wouldn't take you on unless you had trading history.
Right.
So that's why I started Autorama as a used car business. We quickly got up to selling 50, 60 a month. I took on a site that had been a bit of a white elephant, never been really successful. But because we applied the kind of same principles as running a good used car business for a main dealer, we had 2 years of solid trading history. I went to a leasing company in 2006, which was HBOS, and they took us on because we had some trading history, and then set up Vanarama in late 2007. And that was how we kind of got started in leasing.
Yeah. I just love that story about the Citroën C5s, really, because do you think that's sort of like not the glory days of car selling, but do you think things have changed a lot now that you can't really do things like that anymore?
Well, in terms of, so we did really well selling cars on Auto Trader.
Yeah.
because Auto Trader wasn't quite the beast it is today.
Yeah.
You know, so we would do what everyone else used to do and advertise cars £10 cheaper just to get on that first page of Google, Auto Trader. And because we were in early, it took a while for people to catch on to that. So yeah, it's much harder now because, you know, everyone is on Auto Trader. If they're not on Auto Trader, you're on Car Gurus and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. It was still hard then, you know, so manufacturers had a lot of control on what you could do. They still have. It was hard to make money. I think then, from a composite point of view, dealers would be lucky to make 2.5–3% of turnover. The kind of nirvana was to get to 4%. I think now that's changed somewhat. It's even harder to make money. The cost of being a franchise dealer is much higher than it was then. I looked at being a main dealer, but the reality was the cost of entry was so high. I could have done a sponsored dealer program, but I quickly realized that'd be limited to one product and I wouldn't be able to sell online as well as I can now. So yeah, it was more fun probably then. You know, so less regulation, less red tape. I think the problem for dealers and for us, to be fair, is since FCA became a thing in 2014, we've gone from we sell a few vans online to being financial sales professionals. At the heart of regulation is treating the customer fairly, but it means that the cost of it is quite expensive now. And the time taken to do it, you know, we've got compliance officers and we've got QA teams and stuff like that, monitoring phone calls, all the necessary stuff you have to keep yourself safe from a compliance standpoint. So it's definitely more complicated now. I think it's still fun. We have great fun here, and I'm sure there's a lot of dealers who have a great time with it, but it's certainly much harder.
Yeah. It's just that idea of just setting up a domain, you know, within 10 minutes and then putting an advert into the Daily Mail and then the phone starts ringing. I mean, in many ways, it's sort of like the cliched view of which some people still have got of car dealers. But the reality is it's just way more complex, like you were just saying. But yeah, so the Vanarama sort of started in 2007. Did you really sort of spot a sort of a gap in the market for that? I mean, was there much competition around at that time?
So yeah, I mean, the market has been very competitive for a long time. When we started leasing, yeah, there's probably a few more van leasing brokers, if you like. We're a bit more than a standard broker now in terms of what we do from a technology standpoint. But yeah, I don't know if there's more people doing it or not now. Well, what I would say is that it was easier entry then. You know, so there was a lot more what you would call bedroom brokers. The barrier to entry wasn't as big, you know, so people weren't really worried about compliance because there was some compliance, there was anti-money laundering and stuff, but nothing like there is now. So I would say there's less competitors from a broker standpoint now, but more and more people are online now. So dealers have got to be online. If they weren't before COVID, they certainly are now, or they're spinning up online solutions. Manufacturers know they've got to be online. So, and the competition is coming from different places. You've got people like CarWow. You've got even people like Kazam and Kazoo. Even though you wouldn't look at it and say they're a competitor to new cars and leasing, they're one of our biggest target audiences is people who are considering a used vehicle. So the competition is different. I don't know if it's more competitive or not. It certainly was easier then in terms of if you knew how to work Google, you could do really well. But there's so many more platforms now. You know, we've got a chatbot selling vehicles in Facebook Messenger. We could deploy it in Instagram, and you know, lots of businesses can do that. So it isn't just about what's happening in Google; it's what's happening in other channels, and voice will be a thing now soon as well.
Yeah. And as we all know, that Google is you know, there was a time when Google was very straightforward, but now, due to its algorithms that are constantly changing, it's not an easy thing to actually work, and it really does favour the big brands in many ways. And Vanarama very much is becoming an enormous brand. partly due to your football sponsorship.
Yeah, that's been massive for us. So we did that in 2014. It was a huge deal for us at that point. It was 2.1 million quid. At that point, our business net worth was 700 grand. So it was a kind of all on red moment. But when we looked back at previous sponsors, we knew that in terms of digital, the assets that you get with the deal, you've got a page on every club's website. The big thing that Google likes is real people talking about your brand. Yeah, so social signal is a big thing. Because of the sponsorship, we've got 300 to 500 people talking about Vanarama every day, depending if it's off season or on season. So Vanarama National League side, Hemel has signed a player, sacked a manager, released tickets, score updates, transfer rumours. So that's a really strong signal to Google that we're a real brand. We've got fans talking about us in forums. We've got a page on every club's website. That's the digital assets. We've got boards at every ground. The BBC talking about our brand name when they read out the results every Saturday. So yeah, that's been big for us, and it's allowed us to expand into other products. It means that some of the doors that we struggled to get open before the sponsorship now are a bit easier to open because people have heard of us. So it's paid off in lots of ways, not just from a pure sales perspective. And you don't often expect to get sales from brand directly. But what it did immediately was the people who were finding us online from a pay-per-click advert were suddenly much more likely to convert because they'd heard our name read out in the results program.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been big.
Yeah, and people, when there's a big brand, people are more likely to trust it, aren't they? It's just a fact of life, isn't it? And it's human nature, isn't it? When you see a brand plastered around football stadiums or in bus shelters or wherever, much like brands like Carwow have discovered, people are more likely just to type you into the search bar on Google first, aren't they?
Yeah, well, it gives you awareness, and then what you've got to then try and do is kind of build trust. So the great thing about brand is it gives you visibility, but that doesn't really count for anything, or it can be counterproductive if your service levels don't live up to it. So what I like about it is kind of stretches us to make sure that we live up to the service standards people expect from a big brand.
Mm-hmm. Of course, with Vanarama, it's not vans and LCVs and pickups; it's cars as well.
Yeah.
It's rapidly becoming. It's a trend that's been growing for a long time, isn't it? But very much so now, and probably well into the 2020s, it is becoming the way that people buy a car. Well, not buy, but they get into a new car, isn't it? Leasing.
Yeah. So to be honest, when I was selling PCP in dealerships, what most customers would tell you, as a business manager or a salesperson, you'd ask them how often they want to change their vehicle, and they'd always say something like 3 or 4 years. And 80% of people on a PCP change their vehicle at the end of the contract. Very few pay the final payment and keep it, which, if you think about it, is leasing behaviour.
Yeah.
And now more so than ever, what they're really interested in is usership rather than ownership. And there's a few reasons for that. There's not many bad vehicles now. You've got death of a company car, so there's more people given a cash allowance. And when they're used to having a company car that's changed every 3 or 4 years with all the bills included, they're probably more likely to lease. Then there's kind of the fact that more people want to buy online. They're spending 14 hours online doing their research. By the time they come to us, they're better informed than we are. They want convenience. They're more time poor than ever before. And then you've got the kind of move to electric. We've done lots of focus groups where customers are saying they know they've got to get to fully electric, but the infrastructure and the kind of technology is not where they need it to be for whatever they need a vehicle for. But they use words like they'll change it every 3 or 4 years, a bit like a mobile phone.
Yeah.
Or when technology changes or their circumstances change. Over 50% of the searches on our website start with something like, I need an SUV and I've got £300 a month to spend. So people are much more persuadable on model, which is similar to what it was when I started leasing vans. People said transit, they meant transit size. It could be a Vivaro or transporter. At that point, people were very specific on what car they wanted. It was a BMW 3 Series. They wanted gloss black alloys, not just any type of leather. They wanted lambskin leather. I think there was 3,000 different permutations of BMW 3 Series at that point.
Yeah.
Now, customers are starting with us inquiring about a Focus and driving away with an Audi A3 or an Audi Q5 because it's only £40 a month more expensive.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, it's very different now. It's much more like a van sales inquiry was 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, from personal experience within my family, you know, the search for a new car didn't start with, right, we want a make, a model, a color, an engine, trim level. It was, we want this size of car for this amount of money. And, you know, at one point we could have had everything from a Dacia right up to an Audi. And you know, the luck of the draw really came down to the monthly figure. It wasn't whether, you know, we particularly wanted the Audi or we wanted the Hyundai. It just comes down to that monthly figure. And like you were saying, that is what's happening. You know, we've seen it with mobile phones and all the other sectors where it just simply comes down to price. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, listen, if you look at what Amazon have done, their model is built around value, selection, and convenience. You know, and if you think about millennial buyers, the first millennials are 40 this year. Yeah, so it's not just a young person thing. This is a kind of consumer thing. They want a frictionless process. They don't want to spend unnecessary time. And there'll always be an element of customers who want a face-to-face experience, who want to go into a dealership and have a test drive. 90% of the vehicles we sold last year, customer had never taken a test drive before they took delivery. But going back to the Amazon model, you know, Amazon aren't always the cheapest, but they are the quickest and the best.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's changed somewhat since I first started retailing. Customers are much. Our competitors aren't just motor dealers. Our competitors are other brands like CarWow. Sorry, CarWow. That's a Freudian slip. Like Amazon. You know, they want a seamless transaction. They want it in as fewer clicks as possible, and all of that was true before COVID-19.
So how has COVID-19 been for you then?
So the first, I was saying to you before we had the call, you know, the 24th of March when I walked around, I was the last person out of the business. Yeah, I thought, will we ever be back here? It felt, you know, apocalyptic. It was quite scary. We spent the first week kind of making sure that our people were okay, getting everyone set up. We'd done a lot of work to get everyone set up to work remotely, making sure the cash was fine. And then we realized we had a kind of golden opportunity to work on some big strategic projects that we would have got done this year, but it would have been in the midst of dealing with business as usual. You know, so we've been a tech business, if you like, an online business for some time, but we're going through a bit of a digital transformation program to kind of make sure that we can give customers an even slicker service and remove more friction than we have previously. And there was stuff that we had planned to deliver this year that we've been able to do in 12 weeks. That's going to take the business forward probably 2 or 3 years. And you know, I'm typical entrepreneur. I kind of always look for the silver lining. We realized that without the pressure of sales for a couple of months, whatever it was going to be, we could really double down on fixing some things that we want to fix, implement some new processes, get some new tech launched. So we've done some really great stuff in the last 12 weeks.
Yeah. And I've been talking to lots of dealers, and they all say sort of similar things. And the irony in all of this is that once dealers and companies such as yourselves stop selling cars, you know, they're actually able to improve their business. You know, it's the day-to-day stuff, which is the whole point of the business, which is selling cars and leasing and et cetera, actually gets in the way of developing the business even further.
Well, it can do, because you have a yearly budget. We've got outside investors, etc., and they're really great. They're really supportive. There's no real pressure, but we want to put in a performance, and then you're trying to implement stuff that changes the world of our sales force, for instance. And you've got people who will say, "Well, we haven't got enough leads," or whatever. And actually, what we're trying to implement is full e-commerce. And we were doing really well at it. We just weren't doing it quick enough. And we weren't really putting the customer first as much as we wanted to, or we're used to doing. And the really surprising thing was we carried on selling right throughout. You know, so within 2 weeks we were selling at 25% of pre-lockdown levels. And at first I was kind of like, why would anyone buy a vehicle right now? You know, because you just looked at the news and what was happening, the death toll rise, and you think, how are people still buying? And then that gradually crept up, and we're now at kind of 80% of pre-lockdown levels. We could be at 100%, and we could be over, but the funders are taking a very different view on credit score right now, unsurprisingly, because scorecards traditionally work on retrospective data, and that's kind of null and void right now. They've got to try and look forward, so that's a slight challenge. Dealers haven't brought everyone back from furlough, so getting updates on stock availability and booking deliveries, that's harder than it was. So we could be at 100%. So, but the point is, because we weren't under any pressure, we were able to say, right, let's take the pressure off sales. Whatever we sell as a bonus, let's do everything we'd like to do in 12 months, in 3 months.
Yeah.
It's been great, been really good.
Do you think a big part of that is that people are sitting at home, they even though they don't know what the future is going to be, they do want to have some sort of sense of optimism and trying to get back to a normal. And what better way of dreaming of a better future than by getting in, speccing up or checking the best finance deals for their new car. It's a bit of sense of optimism in many ways, isn't it?
Yeah, well, look, having people at home on their devices, you can. It wasn't too much of a surprise that our traffic actually went up.
Yeah.
It didn't happen straight away. It took about 6 weeks for that to happen, but traffic went up. And yeah, we weren't getting as many inquiries as a percentage of traffic, but at least people were looking. Then the inquiries started to build up again. And yeah, I think you're right. I think people knew eventually we're going to come out of this. The people who weren't as worried about their jobs, etc., said, okay, let's have something to look forward to. And then we had tradespeople who needed a van. And there's lots of tradespeople I know who carried on working throughout, particularly, your landscapers and people who were able to work outside or on construction where they weren't having to go into people's houses. So there's a number of factors, but yeah, I think you're right. There was an element of let's have something to look forward to.
Yeah. Well, that neatly leads me on to my next question, really, which was: have you seen a spike in interest, particularly with vans, sort of like a transit-size van or a traffic-size van, where people have thought, we need more vans to actually cope with home delivery services?
Yeah, so you've probably seen, like we have, a lot of local businesses now have suddenly realised that they could be doing more to augment their service. So vehicle deliveries, so we've got restaurants locally that have suddenly spun up online delivery services. We've got farm shops that are doing deliveries to their local communities, and something that they probably wouldn't have done before. And now they're talking about having that, even when things return to normal for them, if it returns to normal, whatever their new normal is, will involve home deliveries of some sort. So yeah, we're seeing more demand from that type of customer.
Yeah. Well, we had Steve Bridge on the show on Monday, of course, as I'm sure MD of Mercedes-Benz Vans, and he was saying that there was one particular supermarket, they'd had their new order of Sprinters, and due to the number of obviously more home deliveries they were doing, they actually went back to Mercedes and said, well, those vans that we traded in last week, can you refurbish them and get them back on the fleet? I suppose all of this has had, I know you don't necessarily deal with used vans and that part of the market, but it's had a massive effect across all sectors, new and used, the coronavirus, hasn't it?
100%. Well, look, what this crisis has done is, as I think I mentioned before, it's acted as a magnifying glass on a lot of situations. So from a consumer's perspective, there was people who never used Zoom before. Now suddenly they use it daily with no problem. There were people who had never ordered shopping online. They probably won't go back to what they used to do. And there's going to be a large proportion of consumers that never go back to how they used to do things, because they've suddenly realized actually it's quite easy. Yeah.
As a CEO, and you're used to having 250 people all around you, how have you personally coped with having lots of people working from home? Has it been a bit of a struggle for you? Have you taken time to adapt to it?
I did. I took a couple of weeks to adapt to it. One of the big things, if anyone ever comes to business, is people talk about the vibe and the culture. So there's a real buzz in the business. It's always very busy. The phones are ringing. We've got music being piped through the building. it looks great. It's a good place to be. So I struggled with that a little bit, but then I kind of quickly went, okay, where's the advantage? So we were 85% capacity before lockdown. I was probably a year, 18 months away from needing either a bigger building or an additional one. We had 3 car parks about to rent a 4th one. And I'm suddenly looking and thinking, actually, I won't need a new building for some time, and I probably don't need any more than 1 car park. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm looking at the positives.
Yeah.
We've been able to make the technology work really well. Working from home will be a permanent feature for us. It'll be proportionately, it'll be different depending on whether someone's on the phone to a customer. But even people whose sole role is being on the phone to customers, they will all get to work from home for a proportion of their working life. And the great thing is I was a bit of a naysayer on working from home. I'll be totally honest. I was kind of a bit old-fashioned. I like getting my uniform on. I like coming into the business, but the benefits far outweigh the negatives. Because in our staff service, and we're quite a good employer, I think. We look after people, and we kind of take into account what they want. But there's been a lot of employees say they'd like some flexibility in their working life. They'd like the ability to work from home. And we've gone from being a little bit closed-minded to that to now going, actually, why wouldn't we do that? Because what we have proven is people can be much more productive when they've got the time to focus. So even though I've been in here every day, that's more about me having a routine, my internet connection at home. I live a bit remote. And I was having calls every day. So I kind of used it as an excuse to come in here and kind of stick to my routine. But when we are more back to normal, I will definitely make sure I work a proportion of my time at home so I can work on the kind of big picture stuff and focus. So yeah, it's been really good. And like I say, some of the work we've done, we just wouldn't have got done in the same period if at all this year. So yeah, it's been really good. I found it was worrying at first for a short period, but then we quickly went, actually, let's use this to our advantage.
Yeah. Well, you most certainly are a good place to work because you've won the Sunday Times best small companies to work at for 3 years running, haven't you? So, the challenge which all businesses are going to face now is how can you instill a sense of community and being part of the family whilst everyone's working from home. But that's something which many businesses are going to have to adapt to, and in many ways it's something which businesses needed. It's needed this change, really, hasn't it? In lots of ways.
Definitely, and you're right to call out. So we talk about our values quite a lot, and our culture is really important. That will be the challenge, and it's not something you can just say that'll be easy, because it won't be. Culture doesn't happen by accident. Yeah. So we've got to really work hard to say, okay, how do we not lose that? And the hope is, we might lose an element. We might lose an element of the vibe, because there's nothing like having a collaboration session, the coffee machine conversations, the casual banter that can actually help innovation, all that kind of stuff you still need to try and facilitate. So it's a question of, okay, if people are only going to be in the physical space 2 days a week, how do you make sure you squeeze the life out of that to make sure that you ingrain the culture? And how do you make sure that when you talk to someone remotely, you can have as an effective conversation as you could if you were face to face? So yeah, we haven't got answers for all of that, but the benefits will make it worth working for.
Yeah. We've just had a question come in saying perhaps Andy would like to try Undercover Boss. That's something you can put on your to-do list in 2020, isn't it?
Perhaps 2021. We've got quite a busy year, but yeah, it's a good program.
Yeah. So how is the rest of the year looking for you? Is like you said earlier on, it's been a bit of a reset button, I suppose. You've been able to bring forward certain developments which you've had time to actually explore. What's the rest of the year looking like for you?
So the rest of the year, we're bringing more people back. We had 40% of people on furlough right at the start. I think we've now got 25% on furlough. So we're bringing more people back. There's lots of stock out there. Something like 500,000 to 600,000 vehicles that should have been registered March, April, May, June. That are kind of, because the stock production is planned 6-8 months out.
Yeah.
So there's stock on the ground. Manufacturers and dealers want our help with it. So, and there's pent up demand. So we can have a good time with it. They were saying yesterday that there could be more of a V-shaped recovery now, because they started talking V-shaped right at the beginning, then they talk possibly U-shaped or W-shaped. Whatever it is, we can kind of take advantage of it. We're kind of well primed with what we've been working on. So we're pretty confident. The only kind of caveat is I'm kind of managing expectations in the businesses. We don't know what the impact of a second spike will be. Because I have to say, it does feel like a second spike is inevitable. Although I think we're better prepared for it. So we didn't use Nightingale. The hospitals didn't collapse like we feared.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the impact will be quite as big, and it certainly won't be as scary because we got through it once. But we just have to kind of manage the impact on that. And then, of course, as furlough unwinds, what's the job market going to look like? So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I am very optimistic.
Yeah. And of course, one thing to remember is that demand is not going to, or that interest in having a new car or pickup or van is not going to disappear, is it? Like we've seen during, the first lockdown that we've had. People still want to transact, people still want to buy, don't they? So if there is a second wave, and hopefully there isn't, that's unlikely to disappear, isn't it, really?
Yeah, that's right. It's just a question of how big the job losses are.
Yeah.
Things are starting to drip through. GDP, I think, was down 20% last month, wasn't it? But there's other data that says people have got 15% more money in their bank accounts. So money's there, it just hasn't been spent. So there is cash burning holes in people's pockets. Yeah. So I think that the net result is that there'll be market share for us to go after.
Definitely, yeah. Final question, Andy. If you could go back to 2004 when you're setting up your business,
yeah,
what piece of advice would you give yourself?
So we took our technology in-house in 2017. Yeah. I should have done that 5 years earlier.
Really?
Yeah. So the advances we've made in the last 3 years are pretty huge. I should have focused more on that earlier. The clues were there for us. I just didn't. There was so much other stuff going on. I didn't kind of get a grip of that. And we had great support externally to kind of build our website and stuff like that. But we could have made a lot quicker advances in what we've done had I done that. And then also kind of bringing in a bigger top team. So we got C-suite, we've got great CTO, CMO, COO, CFO, etc. I could have brought one or two of them in quicker. So that would be what I'd probably have done quicker. Better control, better management of the cash. We were pretty good, yeah. But having someone as good as the CFO we've got now frees me up quite a lot. So I'm a pretty good generalist. I've done pretty much all the roles in the business. But because I was so focused on sales and marketing, which is where my key strengths are, I didn't pay enough attention to some other areas. So that's what I do different.
Yeah. Well, thank you for an honest answer. That was great.
No problem.
And I think we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid, Andy. But thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure finding out more about the business.
No problem, James.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So, as you probably are aware, we've moved to 3 shows a week. So our next show will be on Friday, which will be with Tom Blackmore from Divine Auto. So please put that in your diary. If you want to get involved in shows like this, please do email me, james.batchelor@blackballmedia.co.uk, or James Baggett, and he's james@blackballmedia.co.uk. Which just leads me to thank Andy once again, and thank you for joining us. And I'll see you on Friday. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.